Assalamu Alaikum.
Walaikum Assalam.
So, are you ready for today's story?
Yes, I am.
Alright. Inshallah, I'll tell you the remaining story of Khadija Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anha. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. The story of Khadija Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anha. Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had been married to Khadija Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anha for 15 long years by now. She was the first person to accept Islam. She knew that her husband would speak only the truth and she trusted him. One day, Angel Jibreel alayhi salam taught the Prophet how to perform the wuzu. Then he taught the Prophet how to say the salah. When the Prophet learned this, he taught this to Khadija Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anha as well. From that day, they started to pray in their own house. Ali bin Abu Talib, the cousin of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, was staying at their house and he saw them praying together. He was only 10 years old and he was curious to know what they were doing. When he asked, the Prophet told him that they were offering their prayers or salah. The Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told the boy that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala had made him a prophet and revealed the Quran to him. The next day, Ali met the Prophet and said, I want to accept Islam and follow its teachings. The Prophet accepted this request gladly. Thus, Ali became the second follower of Islam after Khadija. They continued to pray together from that day onwards. The Prophet led the prayers and Ali would stand next to him. Khadija stood behind them. Many days passed by and one day the angel appeared again to the Prophet. The angel informed that it was now time to call the people to Islam. He asked the Prophet to preach the message of Islam to the people. It was the dawn of a new era. The Prophet started calling people to Islam. He gave his full time attention in preaching people about Islam. Preaching Islam was not an easy job, but Khadija Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anha supported her husband wholeheartedly. She gave up her entire fortune for the good cause of Islam. She got quite involved in her husband's work as well. She met people and talked to them about Islam. Slowly and steadily, people realized that the Prophet was speaking the truth. They started joining Islam one by one, but not everyone liked what they were hearing, especially the Quraysh men. The Quraysh tribe were mainly the leaders of Makkah. Most of the rich men in Makkah belonged to the Quraysh tribe. They were scared that if people started following Islam, then they would no longer be feared and respected. They started treating the Prophet and his followers very cruelly. They threw garbage at the Prophet whenever he passed by, started beating those who was following the Prophet, and even chased some of them out of Makkah. Several kinds of ban were imposed on Muslims. They were not allowed to take part in their gatherings and refused to do business with them. One day, the Prophet was sitting on top of Hira mountain. He had been sitting there for a long time now. When he did not reach home at his usual time, Khadija started to worry about him. She asked one of the men to go and look for him in Makkah. But after a while, the man returned. He couldn't find the Prophet anywhere in Makkah. Khadija waited for some more time, but the Prophet didn't return. She decided to go and search for the Prophet herself. She carried some food and water with her. The Prophet had been in the company of Angel Jibreel alayhi salam. The angel said to the Prophet, Your wife is on her way here. She has got food and water for you. When she arrives, tell her that there will be a house made of pearls for her in paradise. Like the angel said, Khadija soon reached the cave. The Prophet saw that she was carrying food and water with her. Then the Prophet told her about the angel's message. Khadija calmly replied, "May God's peace and blessings be upon you, Rasulullah." The Prophet had started gaining many more followers. When the Quraysh leaders saw this, they were very angry. They imposed social boycott on the Prophet and his family. Abu Lahab, the uncle of the Prophet, was also the leader of the Quraysh in Makkah. He was a very evil man and the worst enemy of Muslims. He ordered a complete ban on the Prophet's family and their followers. No one in Makkah was allowed to buy or sell anything to them. They were not even allowed to talk to them. It was very difficult in those days for someone to live without the support of their tribe. For 3 long years, the Prophet labored quietly to deliver the message of God. Idol worship was deeply rooted among the people, and the Prophet tried to convince as much as he could. After 3 years of struggle, he was only able to secure 30 followers. Even his companions had now started questioning his sanity. By now, his enemies had started plotting against the Prophet. The Prophet preached that everyone were equal in front of God, and this challenged the authority of local priests. One day, they gathered together and decided to suppress the movement of Prophet. They decided that each family should take upon themselves the task of stamping out the followers of Islam. Each household started torturing its own members, relatives, and slaves who were following the Prophet. The people were beaten, flogged, and then thrown into the prison. The hill of Ramada and the place called Bata had now become scenes of cruel torture. Only the Prophet was left out, because he had the protection of Abu Talib and Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Then the priests tried to tempt the Prophet into joining their religion. For this, they sent Utbah bin Rabi to meet the Prophet. "O son of my brother," said the messenger, "you are distinguished by your qualities, yet you have denounced our gods. I am here to make a proposition to you." "I am listening to you, O son of Walid," said the Prophet. "If you are willing to acquire riches, honors, dignity, then we are willing to offer you a fortune larger than what we have among ourselves. We shall make you our chief, and we will consult everything with you. If you desire dominion, then we shall make you our king," said Utbah. When Utbah had finished, the Prophet said, "Now listen to me, son of Walid." "I am listening," replied Utbah. The Prophet recited the first 13 verses of Surah Fussilat. He praised Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and explained about the glad tidings of paradise to anyone who believed in the one true God. The Prophet then reminded him about what had happened to the people of Ad and Thamud. When the Prophet had finished his recitation, he said to Utbah, "This is my reply to your proposition. Now take what course you find the best." When their plan to tempt the Prophet failed, they approached his uncle Abu Talib. The Prophet's uncle tried persuading the Prophet to stop preaching to the people. But the Prophet said, "O uncle, if they were to put the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left hand, and to stop me from preaching Islam, I would never stop." The Prophet, overcome by the thought that his uncle was willing to desert him, turned to depart from his home. But Abu Talib called out to the Prophet loudly. He asked him to come back. When the Prophet came back, Abu Talib told him, "Say whatever you please. By the Lord, I shall not desert you forever." That's all, Abu. Next time, I'll tell you another story.
Thanks. Ma salam, Yusuf uncle.
May Allah bless you. Ma salam, Abu.